but yeah, that's me. As you can see there, that's out in Utah, actually, in a ski resort in Utah, with the only professionally taken photo of me ever. So that was that. We'll skip past that anyway. So when we're talking about health in its wider context, supplements are in the picture. And I think, the short answer probably to why supplements is that we've evolved with a certain physiology, we've evolved with the planet and with nature, and then we've changed nature. I think that probably would sum it up. So, as a species, we've been around 2 million years, and in fact, some of our biochemistry is over 1 billion years old. 1.3 billion. We can trace some of our physiological reactions back that far, and our the evolution of the mitochondria and all those sort of things. I won't go into all of that, but that's what we've done, is we've changed the planet in quite a short period of time, very short period of time, but I'll detail that in a sec. So when we're talking about health in its wider context, I want to stress really the importance of the bottom of this pyramid. First of all, spiritual and emotional health. And if you haven't got that, the rest of the pyramid kind of goes out the window. If you haven't got self-care and self-love, and you're not in a nourishing community, you don't have good relationships with people, you don't sleep well, all these sorts of things will impact every decision that you make. So just the simple thing of getting a good night's sleep, and if that's something you suffer from, then I would encourage you to. There's people like Matthew Walker who've written about that, great authors out there these days. There are fantastic talks, TED Talks and things like that on all these subjects. So if it's something that bothers you, then do something about it. Or try to, at least. So on the bottom of that pyramid, I've put some spiritual practice, some kind of meditation, or if you're religious, prayer, altruism, being nice to people, the sense of community. I mean, certainly in USANA, that is a very, very strong community of positive, like-minded people, and can't really underestimate the importance of that, or overestimate the importance of that. And then, relaxation, work-life balance. You basically sort of sum it up as me time. Having some time out in the 21st century, where we've never been moving faster, or what I mean by that, we've never been stimulated so much with Facebook and Twitter feeds and all the social media stuff and emails flying in. I quite commonly hear people that have traditional jobs. I open my emails today and there's 260 emails I had to answer before I could even sort of get to work. I mean, it's just a ridiculous state of affairs in a way. We're just being bombarded with that. So we need to work very hard to carve out some time for ourselves sometimes. And it's absolutely crucial. And it may not impact you when you're very young, and you're very plastic and you're very flexible, and you're not brain flexible, and you're not so stressed, but it adds up over time. And unless you take proactive steps to keep on top of that, it can get on top of you. So the next thing on the pyramid, I've put exercise, with a few other things there: drinking clean water, getting out in nature, in the fresh air, grounding, which is to do with being in contact with the earth. And it's something, obviously, we've evolved to be in contact with the earth, but we tend to insulate ourselves. We sit in our houses and our offices, and when we go outside, we put on a pair of trainers, and we're resisting, or we're not taking advantage of, all that the earth has to offer. So we're going to be talking about antioxidants a little bit today, but the earth, the way antioxidants work is by donating electrons, and we can absorb those through our feet. But if you insulate yourself, of course, that's not happening. So that is a free source of electrons. It lets you use them, basically. So I know Alan is on the call. She's a big fan of grounding, and there are things you can get: grounding mats, which will help you connect to the earth. You can get grounding shoes, and these things it's free, basically. It's a free source of health. And one reason why very quite possibly that, when you go to the seaside or something, you go on holiday and you're walking along the beach, the sun's shining, you're making vitamin D, you're connected with the sand and the water, and that's all going through your feet, and you've got all these free electrons, and you're also not stressed. No wonder you feel amazing. But we should feel like that all the time, really. It's just our lives get in the way. So the exercise component of that, I would say all exercise is good up to a point. Things like yoga, fantastic. Tai Chi, martial arts. I've put resistance training, which I think is crucial for long-term health, developing muscle mass. As we age, we lose muscle mass, and our immune system is dependent on our muscles supplying glutamine to the immune system. So if we're losing muscle mass, it's sort of no wonder why as you age, your immune system can get more compromised, but also involved in posture, bone density, and all the things kind of that, also brain plasticity, all the things that we kind of associate with being young and vital are improved by resistance training and high intensity interval training, which is that HIIT bit. So things like Tabata training, which is, it's over very fast. That's the good news. The bad news is it hurts a lot, but it's incredibly useful. So Tabata is there's lots of high intensity interval trainings, but Tabata is 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, 8 times. So it takes 4 minutes to do. 4 minutes of pain, but a world of gain for lots of parts of your physiology. And again, sort of all the things that keep you young and vibrant. So beyond that, on top of that, this can be summed up as eating well, and eating perhaps to a large extent in accordance with how we've evolved in nature. So, we had lots of fibrous vegetables growing in Paleolithic times. We had a lot of wild game and fish that we tried to catch, and there were basically seeds around at certain times of year. We only ate fruit. If you think about that, the fruit were they're certainly not what you find in Sainsbury's. They're fruit like crab apples and berries. They're small, but they're packed with antioxidants. We've changed what fruit are, basically. But then on top of that, I've put, there's a question mark there, but there's the supplements. Do we need them? Or, how good is our diet? How good is our lifestyle? Or can we, A, fill in some nutritional gaps, and B, do some sort of biohacking or optimization to drive ourselves to be physiologically the best we can be? So this is just detailing the pace of change of how we've evolved. I said we've been around a couple of million years. So we've got 100,000 generations of hunter-gatherers. That's what we've done, basically. And then we started finding out that we could grow our own wheat and domesticate cattle. And we started settling in towns, and those towns became cities, and we got the massive population explosion. And with it, some diseases that come with being in huge proximity or large proximity with lots of different people. And then the Industrial Revolution came along, when we discovered how to get our energy out of food much more efficiently. So if you've seen sort of, let's say, an African tribeswoman sort of beating maize or something with a big stick or some stone or something, there's a lot of calorific expenditure. There's a lot of energy that's actually going into producing food. But if you can put that through a massive machine and just let the machine do all the work, that means that we can get our energy much more efficiently. Now, that you may think that's progress. I don't really think that's progress. I'd sort of like to be living in the Stone Age in a way, and sort of learning about what, my connection with nature and the planet. But this is what's happened. We've got all this Industrial Revolution going on. Obviously, the population is getting much, much bigger. And what have we done in the last 100 years? 100 years, we've got, we've invented things like margarine. That was about 1912 or something. So it's very, very recent. If you think about how long we've been around, and I said our physiology is obviously, it goes back much further than that, into when we were, apes, and working back to when we were basically amoeba. So some of the systems are still around, but it's amazing that just in this absolute snapshot of evolution, we've thought we can invent lots of, quote, foods that that we can incorporate into our diet. So there's something like 600,000 processed food choices that we have. And we call it a diet, we call it food, but just bear in mind that a lot of this food it's either been flown around the world, or it just hasn't existed in our human evolution at all until this last few seconds on our evolutionary clock. So along with that, how do our bodies cope with us changing our food supply that drastically? And if you think you eat a balanced diet, by the way, the UK, we eat 50.7% of our calories are from ultra processed food. So you might think, oh, that's not me, but it's so easy to snack on biscuits or crisps or cakes or little things that are muffins from the super or whatever from a petrol station. It's so easy because these things just surround us all the time. So we have to work very hard to actually eat in a healthy way. And if we look at what our Paleolithic ancestors ate in terms of micronutrients, they were very different as well. So I've got grounding there again. That Alan will be really happy jumping up and down because she loves grounding. So we used to eat much or get in our diet much more vitamin C, for instance, about 4 times what we get now. Vitamin E, 28 IU, we get 3 to 4 now. Zinc, we get about 7. So we're falling way short of what our bodies kind of expect, because that's what they've evolved. And these phytonutrients that we get they're the sort of colorful pigments in fruits and vegetables. We used to get about this. We now get, estimates are between 28 and about 140 milligrams, as opposed to 1,000. So we're not getting, all these things have amazing properties of cancer fighting and things like that. And no wonder the incidence of cancer has improved so much. I think your chance of getting cancer in 1900 was something like 1 in 30. And now it's a 1 in 2 chance that you'll be at some point diagnosed with cancer in your life. And it's the same for dogs as well, by the way. So I think it's 1 in 1.7 dogs will be diagnosed with. It's just astonishing. So link between nutrition and health. We have been establishing over the last 4 decades, or 5, probably 6 decades actually, this accumulation of evidence linking what we eat with how we fare with our long-term health and our risk of developing diseases. And we've found that certain diets, like the Mediterranean diet and the traditional Japanese diet, are associated with long-term health. Now, why should that be? We'll dip into that a bit later. But also there are certain diets which are associated with the opposite of that. And those things are the highly processed Western diet, basically. So the standard American diet, but I said 50.7% of our diet is ultra processed. In America, it's 57.9%. If you go to Portugal, by the way, it's 10.2%. So you look at these sort of Mediterranean communities that have hung on to their, same with Crete and Greece, and they've hung on to their traditional ways of preparing food and cooking food and sharing food with the family, which is kind of a ritual, which we don't do here. So we've also found that diet plays a central role in determining the risk of many birth defects. So like the link with folic acid and spina bifida. Now, the interesting thing is that research was out. You think of what kind of government recommendations we've had, like Camel cigarettes are the best cigarettes to smoke while you're pregnant, and eat a low-fat, high-carb diet. That's still prevalent, but the science just doesn't back it up. But these are government recommendations that we eat like this and behave like this. And we've been told, the best exercise was jogging. It definitely is not the most effective. So we've got all these recommendations that are sort of pervasive through society. It takes ages, decades for that to change. And the thing with folic acid, the information around that, the science around that link was available about 40 years before the government finally said, we recommend every pregnant woman or pre-pregnant woman should take folic acid. So what you're going to hear tonight is kind of on the crest of a wave going forward that I think in 30 or 40 years, everyone will be going, yeah, it's common sense. but now it's not common sense. Now it's a highly debated topic still, but I'm gonna, well, you'll know by now which side of the argument, the debate I'm standing on. But chronic degenerative diseases, I would say these are largely the result of, you know, stress, lifestyle, and the fact that we've changed our diet so much. And the burden of that disease is absolutely huge. So if you look at what we die from, these things here: cardiovascular disease, cancers, dementia, respiratory disease, digestive disease, kidney infection or lower respiratory infection, kidney disease, diabetes, liver disease, Parkinson's, all of the, even suicide, I would say, you know, all of these things have a very strong nutritional component. You take something like diabetes, and the leading epidemiologists in the world, people like Walter Willett, would say that diabetes is not, I think he says 93 or 97% down to lifestyle and diet. I mean, that's huge. It's not what's in your genes. They play a small part, but they say genetics loads the gun and lifestyle pulls the trigger. It's what you do with your genes and what you expose them to determines how they express themselves. So the problem with these chronic degenerative diseases are that they're chronic, i.e. they take a long time to develop, and they're degenerative, and that chronic and the degeneration sort of go hand in hand. So often you're spending the last 10 or 15 years of your life living with relative morbidity or disability. And you'll finally succumb to maybe, you know, you may be in your 60s, 70s, 80s suffering from several metabolic breakdowns or you know, bone density problems or other problems. But these things we're having to live with, and they compromise our health, and not just our health, but they compromise the health of our family who are around us. So, you know, my dad was a prime example he had angina from his mid to late 50s. He died in his late 70s, but 20 years of not being able to come on a walk with his family and stuff like that. You know, that's heartbreaking, really. So we need to be very proactive in the way that we take care of ourselves. And then, of course, you know, what's the standard approach to disease is to wait for it to become something that we can call a disease, i.e. we might be feeling a bit run down, but we can't call it anything or our blood sugar might be a bit out of whack, or we need to sleep after we're eating, or, you know, whatever, we're compromised a little bit. But until it becomes something that the doctor can go, okay, you've got this, and now I can look it up in my book what I'm going to prescribe you for that thing that I've just diagnosed you with. So then how do we treat these things? We treat them with drugs and surgery, and mostly drugs firstly. So we've got this problem of this word iatrogenic. Iatrogenic is disease. It's defined as disease caused by a medical intervention. And many researchers would put it as the third leading cause of death behind heart disease and cancer. And just to, you know, go back to my dad for a second, I mean, he was put on statins, although his cholesterol was 3.2, which is extremely low. You do not want cholesterol that low. And yet they were saying you've got heart problems, so therefore we're going to reduce your cholesterol. What a nonsense. In between being diagnosed with cancer, which she didn't have. My mum's just been misdiagnosed with something. She probably had food poisoning, but they said it was pancreatitis. She's been in hospital, a catheter has been put in her when she didn't need it. She's come out of hospital with potentially C. diff. So it's just amazing. Once you get sucked into the medical system, it's very hard to get out of it. But this is what this guy is the CEO of Valiant Pharmaceuticals. I mean, bravo, he's being honest, but honest for what? You know, he's basically saying we're trying to make money off people being ill. And I've seen drug companies shelve research where the research says that treatment would cure the person. They don't want people to be cured. They want them to be on their drugs for life. And yeah, if you want to dip deeply into that, there's a book called Food is Better Than Medicine and Drugs by Patrick Holford. It is an absolute eye-opener of how there is total pharmaceutical dominance in the healthcare system. So when if I talk about heart disease, what's the first word in your head? Probably cholesterol. And what should be there? Well, probably inflammation is the first word that should be on your head. and perhaps molecules like homocysteine, which should have perhaps the kind of reputation that cholesterol has. Now, why don't we hear about homocysteine? Because there isn't a drug to reduce it, basically. But there are drugs to reduce cholesterol. There are statin drugs. Now, if you take statins, if you've had a heart attack and you take statins, a big meta study in the Lancet showed that you would, so this is the high risk group, you would live 5.3 more days than if you didn't have statins. So it's just a nonsense. Well, it's not a nonsense, and there's a place for pharmaceuticals, but the balance is way off balance. So, in terms of cholesterol, you need it to, a lot of your brain fats are cholesterol. Something like 30% of your cell membranes are cholesterol. We've got all these cells have all got a membrane, so you need that membrane to function properly. We need cholesterol to make sex hormones. We need it to make vitamin D. We need it to make bile acids. It's there for a reason. So why have we got things that are trying to interfere with our biochemistry, where actually the problem is not a disease of cholesterol, it's a disease of inflammation? And I won't go into that in any more detail, but can't stress that strongly enough. And when you look at populations who've got diets high in antioxidants and B vitamins, you find that's going to affect the homocysteine, by the way, in a positive way. You find that those people have a low incidence of heart disease. Nutrition and cancer, 35% of all cancer deaths are diet related. I'd say it's more than that. If you look at this, this thing here, we've got tobacco. I mean, hopefully people don't smoke. It's the worst thing you can do, really. Alcohol, diet, food additives, even pollution, perhaps even medicine here. All of those things that I've just said, you could almost class them as nutrition. Some of it obviously is, some of it less obviously. But I'm saying it's nutrition because it starts on the outside of us and ends up on the inside of us. So therefore, it could be considered part of a diet. And then this circle, actually 3/4 of this circle, then becomes nutrition, really. And so what we decide to take in and what the environment that we're exposing ourselves to all plays a massive part. Then we've got other disease. Every disease that you can think of basically has a big nutritional component. And you only need to think that if disease is associated with inflammation, it's associated with nutrition, pretty much. So osteoporosis, we know about calcium, magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin K2. We'll mention that a little bit later as there's new research coming out on that. But that's not the only, these are not the only things that are involved with good bone health. So there's about 25 different things, including protein and boron and silicon and vitamin C and vitamin K. And there's so many things involved with that. And also with eye health, we know studying populations that have good intakes of antioxidants, certain carotenoids, those sort of pigmented things again, that populations who have a lot of that have better eye health. They don't have as much cataracts and macular degeneration. So there are very clear links established in the scientific literature. And that's kind of led us in the 21st century to this conventional wisdom: eat a balanced diet, 5 to 9 servings a day. I mean, we tend to say 5 in the UK, don't we? Why do we say that? Because it's basically convenient, but that number changes all over the world, by the way. So whichever, in Greece, I think it's 8 portions. In Canada, it's 10 or something. So no government really can agree with this or really agrees on it. They just all agree that we don't have enough. In the UK, how many fruits and vegetables do we eat a day? You might think, I get my 5 a day. Well, the average is 2.9. So some people are getting 0, by the way, and some people are trying hard and may get 10. Some people just eat none. They just don't eat any fruits and vegetables. And I was talking with my friend Angela today about this boy who went blind because his diet was just sort of, in fact, Angela's over there. What was in his diet?
Just chips and bread, I think.
Just chips and bread. That's all he's eating. And this poor boy went blind. I mean, that's amazing. I read something else today about these children that were so constipated because they're getting no fiber and probably not hydrated properly either. So constipated, they've got feces sort of going back up the digestive tract, and they're vomiting feces. I mean, sorry to sort of ruin your Wednesday night, but we need to think very carefully about the effects and what we teach our kids about how to do. So we assume we eat pretty well. Most people you meet and ask would say, yes, I eat a balanced diet, but most people don't really know what that means. I'm going to say I don't know what that means either, although I've studied it a lot. Through this diet, consume RDA levels of essential vitamins and minerals. Now, you might think, okay, if I'm getting the RDA, what does that mean? Recommended daily allowance. Yeah, that'd be fine because it's recommended. It's got the word recommended in it. So where do the RDAs actually come from? And they come from the American military in 1941. They first set the RDA for vitamin C, and they had their soldiers who were off in battle having diseases like scurvy and rickets, and these are acute nutrient deficiency diseases of vitamin C and vitamin D. And they wanted to know, okay, how much of these things do we need to give our soldiers not to get these diseases? So they came up with these RDAs, and the RDAs will for something like 90% of the population. If you eat the RDA, get the RDA of vitamin C, you won't get scurvy. So that it is what it says there. This is from the RDA handbook. They're judged to support satisfactory growth and development. Now, who wants satisfactory health? Not me. I want optimal health. And there are many, many writers writing about what is optimal health these days and how nutrition plays an important part in that. So what these RDAs are, the DRIs is sort of a newer acronym, daily reference intake, but it's the same sort of idea. But what they are not is designed as optimal levels of nutrient intake. This again is from the RDA handbook. So they're saying, no, we're not even asking the question, what's optimal? And we're also not asking the question, how much of these things do you need to answer the most pressing question of the 21st century, which is why are our levels of heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, osteoporosis, et cetera, going up very steeply. Diabetes, I mean, is things like Alzheimer's and diabetes, the graph on those is truly scary. And as such, they're not adequate. So the problem with the RDAs is they're not asking the right question, basically. And then you get, like when it all goes wrong, and we just think that what we put in our mouths is our diet. And we need to think very carefully about the impact of what we put in our mouths, basically, and teach our children to adopt good habits. I like this. So people say you are what you eat, and that was true. That was true 1,000 years ago. You are what you absorb, because you might have problems with absorption in your gut from antibiotics or whatever has compromised your gut function, from what you eat has eaten. So it's not just if you have a steak, it's a steak. What did that cow eat, for example? So cows are supposed to eat grass, aren't they? That's what happens. And if they do, 3% of the fat in their bodies is omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory. They're associated with good health, low incidence of diseases of all sorts. What happens with cows? Well, they basically feed them grains, don't they? And if they feed them grains, they're trying to turn that cow diabetic, basically. So they're trying to get the cow to put on weight so that when it goes to market, it weighs more, because what happens then, they get more money for it. If you feed cows grain, this is what happens to their omega-3s. 196 days later, negligible omega-3s in their flesh. So we've got a very big difference between grass-fed and grain-fed cattle. The same is true of salmon, wild salmon, which is almost impossible to get, but Alaskan salmon, that's what you want to look for, or sockeye salmon. But farm salmon, their omega-3s are much, much lower than wild salmon. And that's what we do, is we try and commercialize everything. And I'm including things like almond milk in that, where, I don't know if you've seen this, but where bees are trucked in to pollinate almond trees, almond flowers, and they die. And the bees are dying in their billions because we're just exploiting them, basically. So I learned at school, this is how we farm. We kind of cut a field into 4 quarters. We put, barley in one, we put rye in one, we let one go fallow for a year. And that's what they did in medieval times. I wasn't at school that long ago, but almost. But what we actually do is we just do this. We just intensively farm. And we try and get as much of a yield out of our soils as possible. Doesn't really matter what's in the plants because they look like plants, don't they? But who remembers what a tomato tastes like? And who knows, when you taste something that actually tastes like a tomato, you go, oh my God, that's amazing. And I remember that from 50 years ago or whatever. And it's the same with a lot of our food. It's nutritionally devoid of things. And we tend to eat with our eyes. So we tend to forget what things are supposed to taste like. But the other problem here, obviously, is the way we treat our planet, our environment, and the animals that live with us on the planet. It's pretty disgusting. And it's all going to feed more and more of a population. The only way out of that is for us to go back to growing our own food in our little allotments and garden patches, I think. So I said we eat with our eyes. Which apple do you fancy? Probably that, because it's big and shiny and round, and they all look pretty much the same, don't they? They're fantastic. So this apple on the left is the Sikkim apple from the Himalayas. This is could be described as the original apple from which we've hybridized and grown all these things. If you juice a litre of the Sikkim apple into a juice, you'd get 7,181 milligrams of phytonutrients, all these fantastic cancer-fighting chemicals. This is the Honeycrisp apple. This is about as sweet as it gets. It's a big bag of sugar. And 7,181 over here, just hold in your mind how many milligrams you think would be in a litre of this apple juice. I won't ask you to chip in because we haven't got time, but 15 is the answer. So 15 versus 7,000. And that's what we've done to our food supply, is we're basically stripping out nutrients. We're going for taste because the food industry knows that we seek out fat and sugar in our evolution, because we used not to be able to get enough of it. Now we just get too much of it. So I said, do you know if you got a balanced diet or not? If you understand how this diagram works, then I'll let you off. But so this is all the reactions that happen in the human cell on a second by second basis. Here's a little snapshot of it. And all these blue things here, they're enzymes. Anything with an A's on the end is an enzyme. And those enzymes will help convert one substance into another substance. But the enzymes, 22% of them are dependent on a mineral or an amino acid or a fatty acid or a vitamin or a cofactor to drive this reaction. And if it's not present in our diet or in sufficient amounts, these reactions don't happen efficiently. And so our biochemistry is consequently compromised. This is how big the number is. Fascinating, isn't it? 15,000 enzymes, 30 quadrillion. So you've got million, billion, trillion, quadrillions, the next one along, chemical reactions every second in our cells. So is our food giving it to us anymore? The argument's getting stronger and stronger. It's stronger now for supplementation than it was 10 years ago. And 10 years ago was stronger than it was 30 years ago. And 30 years ago is stronger than it was 50 years ago, I think. So what do supplements give us? Firstly, they're not an excuse to eat poorly. We need to still be embracing a good quality, plant-based, high fat diet, moderate protein, low carbohydrate, and getting back to nature as much as we possibly can. But what do supplements do? They fill in the inevitable gaps that are left by even the best diet. And I'm going to say that with confidence, because there was a study done in 1977-78, US Department of Agriculture, and they looked at 21,500 people, and they looked at their levels of nutrients in their diet for 10 important nutrients. So, magnesium, omega-3, etc., etc. And out of that 21,500, how many people do you think hit the RDA for those 10 nutrients? And I save you the bother. The answer is 0. So some of these people are just trying to eat toast all the time, but some of them are trying their hardest to eat the best diet they can, but no one can do it because it's just not in the food. If it's not in the food, it cannot be in you, basically. So what do supplements do? If they're adopted properly, they're looking at the scientific literature around the levels of nutrients that you would need to help reduce the risk of chronic degenerative disease. And maybe sort of short-term diseases, and boost your immune system in the short term as well. So, very relevant at the moment, obviously. And if, for instance, we've got a supplement in USANA which is basically vitamin C, zinc, elderberry, and echinacea, and that shouldn't be taken long term. But if you've got a viral infection, there is very good reason to take that to help kill that infection as fast as possible. And interestingly enough, they put a tiny little bit, this is how much you'd think, oh, there's a bit of sugar in there. I'm supposed to avoid sugar, but you need sugar to fight viral diseases, which is interesting, not to fight bacterial diseases, but to fight viral ones. So, that product in itself, worth its weight in gold. I wouldn't be without it in the kitchen, sort of in my supplement cupboard, but that's one of many. But so how much science is there around this? There is a ton. There's a ton. I've got a big book, lots of books, but one of them is called the Encyclopedia of Nutritional Medicine. The 200 pages at the back of that encyclopedia are just full of the studies supporting the use of diet, but mostly supplements in the scientific literature. So it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of studies. This is a very well researched area. It's still a young science, I would say, and it's still evolving, but there's a depth, a wealth of knowledge. So we're going to look at a few little, just the tip of the iceberg, and just scrape the top of that. So this was selenium supplementation. These were people who had a history of skin cancer, and they gave them 200 micrograms of selenium. Now, this selenium is involved in the glutathione peroxidase system. It helps us to detoxify. And we didn't really know much about that until $50 million and pounds, because it was from here and America, were pumped into unraveling the role of selenium in skin cancer, because the results of this study were so dramatic that they stopped the study early after 4.5 years. And they found that in that time of the study, total cancer mortality was cut in half. So that's the big figure to take home. I mean, there's certain other things about that study, but it's a massive effect. Secondary cancers reduced by 1/3. Huge effect. Why, if you've got cancer, would you not go to the doctor and the doctor goes, oh, you should be taking more selenium? Because it's not part of their training, is the bottom line. They're told what you do when you got cancer, it's chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and surgery. So they're not educated in nutrition. It's changing, but it's changing too slowly, in my opinion, and it needs to be a central part of a medical curriculum. Again, go and read that Patrick Holford book, because that'll explain why that doesn't happen. Vitamin D, there are 50,000 studies on vitamin D. It's probably more than that. Vitamin D and cancer, that even tens of thousands of studies on that. And this is one important thing, British Medical Journal, 2014. This is amazing. The researchers estimated that 13% of all deaths in the US, I'm going to say in the UK as well, it's probably at least as bad here, could be attributed to low vitamin D levels. So let that sink in for 1 second. 1 in 8 people are dying prematurely because their vitamin D is too low. And hence the explosion, or this is kind of a result of the explosion in vitamin D research, really. And doctors are now starting to say, you need to check your vitamin D levels, but it's come miles too late. The nutrition industry was saying this 30 years ago. So long-term vitamin C supplement use and lens opacities. So we're talking about cataracts here. And this was very interesting. So they looked at people who'd been taking vitamin C supplements and these 500 milligrams for 10 years or more. And they found that they're associated after 10 years with with about 80% lower risk of developing cataracts. I mean, it's massive, massive. There are other things involved in that, but let's say vitamin C is kind of part of that picture. The interesting thing was after 5 years, there's no statistics or no statistically significant difference. So these chronic degenerative diseases are called chronic for a reason, because they take years and decades to actually manifest as a full-blown condition. One of the biggest problems of our time, neurodegenerative diseases, including Alzheimer's. For me, the most scary kind of disease, when you're trapped in your own head and you don't recognize your family and your family are distraught. I mean, it's a horrendous thing. And unfortunately, it's on the rise, and it's on the rise. It's called diabetes type 3, sometimes because it's associated with high carbohydrate diet, exactly like we've been recommended by the government and the nutrition industry for a long, long time. So our intake of sugar has gone up dramatically in the last 100 years. And if you go back a few hundred years before that, it'd be even more dramatic. But this was a study done with memantine, which is a drug that's prescribed for moderate Alzheimer's, or vitamin E. And they gave a massive amount of vitamin E. It's like a drug dose of vitamin E. And incidentally, I would say this is, although, it's from JAMA, it's from a well-respected medical journal. And the problem in the nutrition industry is the pharmaceutical industry are saying to the nutrition industry, what's your magic bullet? Here's mine. And we have to come up with these things that we can do highly controlled trials on. The magic bullet is the pyramid that I put up, sort of slide 1, basically. That's the magic bullet, is not vitamin E. Although in this case, if you put vitamin E up against this drug, what they found was that it slowed the course of Alzheimer's down by about 20% if you use vitamin E against the placebo. Now, guess what happens if you use this drug? Guess what happens? Guess what you'd be prescribed if you turned up with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's? You're not going to be prescribed vitamin E, are you? You're going to be prescribed a drug, because that's what happens. This drug actually speeds up the progression of the disease against using nothing. But people don't want to come away from the doctor's surgery using nothing. They want hope. And that hope is in the form of this drug. But actually, the progression was accelerated by the use of this drug. And there was another drug, I can't remember the name of the other one, that produced the same results. I mean, it's just appalling, really. But so is there a lot of evidence? Yes. And if you want books on where to find this, on Ask the Scientists on USANA, we have a sort of database of about 1,000, 900 or 1,000 studies, sort of important studies in this area. But there's obviously many more of them if you look on places like PubMed. So what do we mean by advanced levels? Because I've sort of mentioned this a couple of times. Look at vitamin D. This is what we get from our diet, about 100. This is what we were saying, the RDA or the DRI back in the year 2000 was set somewhere around 400 for most people. If you look at the science, it was saying 500 to 800 in 1999. But remember, we've then had this explosion of research, and the research says 2,000 plus. And I would say 2,000 up to maybe 6,000 or 8,000 would be considered an optimal level. It's basically 10 times what we thought 20 years ago. And it's many times greater than what we get in our diet. And of course, it's the sunshine vitamins. So get out in the sun and make your own. That's a good way to do it. But of course, in the UK, we can't do that for many months of the year because the sun just isn't high enough to do that effectively. I'll look at these comments. I can see a few chats, but I'll look at them at the end if that's all right. Because otherwise I won't flow. So supplement industry, how does it stack up? I've sort of already rubbished the pharmaceutical industry, but I'll now rubbish the supplement industry because it is there are regulations in place, but the regulations are very poorly enforced. And just to prove this point, this was a study commissioned by the Attorney General in New York. And what they did was they got a load of scientists together and they said to scientists, right, we get these products from GNC, which is kind of a nutrition specialist, semi-specialist store, and the Walgreens is a supermarket, sorry, Walmart's a supermarket, Walgreens is a pharmacy, and they took these products from the shelves and they took them to the lab and analyzed them. The headline that was produced from this analysis was that 4 out of 5 of the supplements we tested had none of the labeled ingredients. I'll say that again. 4 out of 5 of the supplements we tested had none of the label ingredients. So if you're a consumer trying to protect your health, you're going to trust what's written on the bottle. You have to go a bit deeper than that, I'm afraid. And I think I would go as far as to saying the bulk of supplements on the market are just a complete and utter waste of money. But that doesn't mean they all are, because there's a wealth of science backing up this information. So I'll just go back to just mention this comparative guide to nutritional supplements. So this is, the work of experts like Lionel William, who's a biochemist, and they're comparing, and they're looking at the medical literature and the research and comparing what's in the supplements and matching that up against the medical research. I mean, as far as USANA is concerned, we come first in this guide, so it's rather nice for us that we've got that. It allows us to sort of, hand on heart, say we're producing the right stuff and with all the right ingredients, etc., and pharmaceutical methods of manufacture, which is not that we're a pharmaceutical company, but we're making to the same standards as that. So that's reflected in, the way it's going to protect our body tissues and our tissue function, our organ function. But here it's sort of illustrated with an apple test. I've done some of these. So you've got this apple in water with an antioxidant protecting it. Now this is fine. This is 10 days into the experiment and you can pick that apple out of the water and eat it. But I wouldn't want to eat these. So because basically they are supposed to be antioxidants, but these apples are oxidized. And worse than that, they're growing mold. And why are they growing mold? Because the mold is in the tablet when it's made into a tablet. And it doesn't express itself until you put it in water with a sugar source. But the molds and the yeast and the staphylococcus are in there because the standards of manufacture mean that they're not made in pharmaceutical environments. They're not made in clean rooms where there's positive air pressure, making sure there's no contaminants. And that's the result of shoddy manufacture. And the result of shoddy manufacture is that it will not protect your health, in my opinion. So supplements promote good nutrition lifelong. It's a convenient and effective means of filling in that bit of the pyramid. Making sure you don't have arguments with people and making sure you go to the gym 4 times a week and making sure blah, 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 blah is quite difficult. But popping a pill is a relatively easy addition to your health regimen. So important notice, that's why I put this, important notice, medical evidence is mounting to show that the diseases that we're talking about are not diseases of old age. So we can find the beginnings of osteoporosis, heart disease, etc., in children and adolescents. And they don't express themselves usually till much later in life, but that doesn't mean we can't track and trace the beginnings of the disease to much earlier. We've seen this unfortunate young kid before, but for instance, this childhood obesity, this is better. The most effective strategy for preventing heart disease in adulthood is to prevent obesity in childhood. And it goes back to habits, doesn't it? It goes back to instilling good habits in kids. This was a study that was done with people that were killed in road accidents, and sorry about this slide, but they autopsied these people and they looked at the incidence of fatty streaks in their coronary arteries to see what their risk of heart disease would have been like. And the young middle-aged group, 70% of them already had fatty streaks in their arteries. Even the children had 7% of the children had fatty streaks in their arteries. I mean, that boy in the previous slide, he would definitely. It doesn't mean he's going to die of a heart attack tomorrow, but it does mean that his heart disease risk is massively elevated. And you can see the progression of this is just really clear. It's really clear. These diseases are starting from here, from DOT. from the year dot. So, and I'm going to just go into how, again, sort of modern medicine approaches something like the diabetic scenario, insulin resistance syndrome X, metabolic syndrome, all these things which are associated with high cholesterol, high blood pressure, high triglycerides, metabolic deposition of visceral fat, and being overweight in general. And this insulin resistance, in other words, it's a very important thing that we get this right. But I'm going to just detail with, this is just a patient's results. So not my patient, by the way, but looking at what happens in nature. Basically, we've evolved to control blood sugar, because if our blood sugar goes too high, we die. So we've got this hormone, we've got a battery of hormones, but the main one is insulin, which helps us to control our blood glucose level. So if this patient went to a doctor, the doctor would measure their blood glucose, 4.4, they'd go, fantastic, go home, you're in perfect health. Now, bear in mind that the NHS certainly does not measure this. It does not measure insulin levels, but actually syndrome X and metabolic syndrome, it's the insulin level that we need to be looking at, but we don't look at it. So this patient, clean bill of health, go home. Come back 10 years later, blood glucose tiny bit higher, still not really significant. Look what's happening to their insulin. Now, why is that so elevated? Because we're putting the body under so much stress usually from high carbohydrate diet, that the insulin level has had to go up so much because it's working much less efficiently than it used to. So we have to make more of it and keep our blood glucose from being in a toxic range. So the doctor goes, 5.6, that's fine, go home again. That's cool, see you in 10 years. 5 or 10 years time, come back, 8.3. Doctors now going, oh, that looks a bit elevated. I still can't call you diabetic, so I'm not going to prescribe you diabetic medication, but nevertheless, we need to keep an eye on things. So what am I going to recommend? Eat a low-fat diet. That's the usual recommendation, exactly the opposite of what should be recommended, and go for a walk every day, or join a gym and get on a treadmill. Again, we need to be more aggressive with our approach to exercise. It needs to be what I said at the beginning: high intensity interval training and weight bearing exercise. They're gonna have an impact on something like this, but running, jogging doesn't really do much for that. It will have some effect, but there's far more efficient ways of doing that. I'm getting someone arguing with me, which I hope I hope someone's agreeing with me in the chat. What's happened to the insulin in here is basically the insulin, our pancreas is putting out as much insulin as it possibly can to control this blood glucose. But again, it's not being measured. So you've got this advice, you're going away, you come back in a few years' time. Now your blood glucose is over 11, so 11.1 is the sort of cutoff point, and then you'll be diagnosed with diabetes. It's far too late, obviously. Look what's happening to the insulin. It's actually your pancreas is burnt out. And what the irony here, the pancreas is working as hard as possible to put out its insulin, but the glucose, which is so high in the bloodstream, is producing free radical damage that destroys the very cells that produce the insulin that are trying to control the system, control this situation. So amazing. But finally, we've got a diagnosis. Now, if you're a diabetic, you're at massive risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, amputation, kidney failure, eye disease, and we're just approaching all these things too late. Same thing is true with calcium nutrition, or I won't say calcium, I'll say bone nutrition, but because calcium is a bit of it's seen as the thing for bone health, but it's a part of the picture. It's our major bone mineral, but when we're looking at bone nutrition, to just eat more calcium, don't do it. And I'll explain why in a little bit. But what I was going to say about that slide just quickly is we know that if we can improve an adolescent's bone density by 5%, then her risk of osteoporosis goes down by 40% later in life. So again, habits, teach your children good habits, get them on good diet and supplementation and an exercise regime early on. So it becomes something that they just do. So good nutrition is a lifelong imperative. As I said before, nutritional supplements are just an easy way to fill in these nutritional gaps and to help give us some proper health insurance, not the health insurance we pay for. That means that when we need hospital treatment, we're covered for it. Health insurance, which actually ensures our health. And that's what this is all about. That's what this whole talk is about. So it doesn't matter what age you are. That actually looks like my own Wednesday, doesn't it? For those who know. You need to be incorporating this stuff into your diet and these habits into your lifestyle. So that's basically been a summary of that. I mentioned this already, the 4 out of 5 supplements. The amazing thing was that in these diverse things they were testing, they were finding powdered rice, asparagus. There was a house plant called Dracaena. These things were in kind of every sample. So to my mind, what's happening, you got this huge bulk powders that are tableted, and then they're just labeled with different labels. It's just disgusting, I think, because they're duping the consumer, aren't they? So how do you actually make some sensible decisions in an industry that's plagued with deception, or if not deception, then at least shoddy quality control? So we're going to talk about something that, I'm very proud to be associated with USANA. I've already said one reason, but why, but I've been associated with it for 22 years. And never in that time have I thought I've recommended the wrong stuff. And there's actually some better stuff out there, but we'll talk a little bit about it. It basically comes down to science. It comes down to an attention to detail in science, which is unparalleled in the industry. So name me another nutrition company that has 85 scientists and 18 PhDs on full-time staff. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. If there's a nutrition company that's got 1 PhD, then I'll go, okay, well, they've got a bit of credibility, but we have 18. And we do collaborative research with universities and hospitals around the world, places like Linus Pauling Institute as well. We make everything in-house. So we've got complete control over it. And you can see, well, I've been to this place several times where they manufacture. It's like a laboratory, basically. It's as clean as a laboratory. And we're making to pharmaceutical grade. We were the first company in the world to manufacture the pharmaceutical grade. So we've got complete control over everything. And that means last couple of years, we've won the award. This is an English company that doles out these awards. Best nutritional supplement manufacturer on the planet. This is a business award. More professional Olympic athletes take our product than any other supplement on the planet. Now, why is that important? Because you might think, well, I'm not an Olympic athlete. It's important because Olympic athletes and their nutritionists, you think of Serena Williams' nutritionist or Manny Pacquiao's nutritionist, or any Olympic superstar, they are going to pay for the best nutritionist that they can afford. And in that case, in Serena Williams' case, that would be the best nutritionist on the planet, probably. So they do that because they need to make absolutely sure that they're putting in their body what needs to be there, and that they're not taking in any contaminants, which is why we give our athletes uniquely a $1 million athlete guarantee against that. That means they can train harder. I mean, it's about their health, basically. It's about the body's ability to recover from the intense training that they're doing. But our bodies are under similar stress. It just goes in different, it manifests in different ways, or we train it in different ways. But this stress may be because we don't actually eat a brilliant diet, and we don't sleep as well as we might, and we don't do enough exercise, all those sort of things. But the reason that I brought up the Olympic athletes is because you've got these experts in their field. They are going to ask questions of any nutritional supplement company that are more intense and sophisticated than you or I might know how to ask. That's the point, basically. So it means that these people are doing their due diligence, and you can be sure that if they've done that, then it's pretty good for us to follow suit. So Sorry, Centrum, but I'm going to just mention Centrum because they're the biggest selling multivitamin on the planet. Now, why is that true? Because they advertise effectively. They've got a great A to Z kind of slogan. You know, put all this stuff in your body; it will cover you from A to Z, or A to Z if you're in the States. But if you look at just a quick glance of kind of levels on here, you can see there's a massive discrepancy between these levels. Why is that? Basically because these levels are reflecting the medical literature about what kind of levels are actually important, but this only tells half of the story. Vitamin E, for instance, if you make it in the lab, is called D-L-alpha tocopherol. The USANA used D-alpha tocopherol, which is a natural form. The synthetic form is only an eighth as effective as the natural form, and may even cause some damage as well. So actually this is not 15 milligrams, it's 2. It's 2 versus 134. Why is there iron in here? Why don't we put iron in ours? Because half of the population have too much iron already. And iron is a pro-oxidant, which will speed up the oxidation of cholesterol. You need it. I'm not saying you don't need it. So don't go and try and get iron out of your diet, but you don't want to be anemic, but you definitely don't want to have too much. And if you've got a disease called hemochromatosis, which is about 1% of the population have, if you add extra iron to your diet, you'll die. I mean, these people would know that, and they probably wouldn't supplement with it. But why have we got vitamin K2 in our, and why have we just brought out a separate supplement for vitamin K2? It's new research, so there's only about 5,000 studies on that, but it's really, really, really important. And I'll just go into it a tiny bit, but I'll do a separate talk on K2 sometime in the kind of near future. But it's to do with basically pathological calcification. So vitamin K2 acts as a signaling molecule. Remember I said if you take too much calcium, it's not a good thing. That calcium, some of it goes in the bones, some of it gets deposited in the arteries, it can get deposited in the stomach, in kidney, make kidney stones, in the lung, in the eye. It can get deposited all over the place, and there are certain sort of nanobacteria which are really dangerous that build a little igloo of calcium around them and protect themselves. And you can get, what the K2 does is it basically tells the calcium to be deposited in the bones. It takes it out of the places where it shouldn't be, and it helps to signal the body to transfer that calcium into the bones and increase bone health. So it's reducing the risk of things like heart disease. I mean, there's a certain case for a little bit for breast cancer and as I said, kidney stones and stomach problems as well. But basically it's signaling this calcium to go where we actually want it to be. So why don't Centrum put it in? Because they don't know about it, because it's new research. But that's the point. Stick with a company that's got loads of PhDs that are keeping up with the research, basically. This K2, by the way, can be reduced by use of antibiotics, unfortunately, which have been overprescribed for ages. Statins, there's other drugs that can reduce that, and typically in our diet we just do not get enough. It's a very, very important nutrient, and over the next few years you're going to see again an explosion of research around this. So we are now considering, although this is a good sort of protective level, actually the optimum level is beyond that. And that's what happens with a lot of this research. It takes ages to put this formula together. And I would say we've changed our formula 8 times. The next iteration of this formula will probably include more K2. It depends on your diet as well. This K2 comes from a high fat diet. It's in animal meat, it's in egg yolk, it's in where else? Sort of hard cheeses and things like that. So an organ meat. So thank you, Angela. So that was Angela's one second contribution to the talk. That's where you're finding this stuff. So if we're eating it's a little bit dangerous if you're eating a vegan diet, for instance, because you're not going to get so much of this. So you can eat disgusting stuff like natto, which has the highest levels. But anyway, this K2 is a very important part of our diet, a very important part of supplementing as well. So that's what it does. It's that signaling molecule. So these are just some of the Olympic athletes and professional athletes' bodies that use USANA as part of their training. Some of my friends work with these athletes. For instance, at Bournemouth Football Club, we know, I don't follow football, so I don't really know how they're doing in the league, but I will say they are the fittest team in the league. They cover the most ground, and they're able to train harder and recover better from their training. And that's evidenced by the amount of ground that they cover, basically, as a team and as individuals. So at the last, this is 2014 Winter Olympics, we came second in the medal table. If we were a country, we would have come second in the medal table behind Russia, who then got disqualified for everything because they were cheating. So in the nutrition industry, we've got these kind of four philosophies. One is you read the newspaper, and the newspaper says vitamin E causes cancer, and you go, oh my God, I just bought vitamin E, I need to chuck it down the toilet. And then the next week you read another thing from the same paper, maybe saying vitamin E actually can reduce the risk of heart disease. You go, oh, can it? Okay, I need to buy some again, or try and dig it out of the toilet where I flushed it down last week. So the bottom line here, do not get your nutritional information from newspaper headlines, because you can make a headline from anything, and they do all the time. And it's a very dangerous way to try and organize your health regime. So the second thing is, go and take something with an RDA, with 100% of the RDA of everything, because then you're protected. No, you're not. You're protected against rickets and scurvy and pellagra, beriberi, but you're not protected against the big chronic degenerative diseases which we're talking about. So then you've got kind of the best philosophy, who does the most research, basically. And again, in this book, it's USANA that comes first. And well, go and do your own research, because I challenge you to find anything with anything like the amount of research behind it. And then we're talking about where's nutrition and where are supplements and where are micronutrients, where is this conversation heading? Now, if you've got really, really intelligent scientists on your team, you can start to innovate, and you can start to understand the next generation of how supplements are working. And this innovation, we call it intelligence in our products, and it basically is understanding how the cells talk to each other and how we can trigger the production of our internal antioxidant systems, which are far, far more powerful than the external systems. So the external systems would be take some vitamin C. The internal equivalent is take phytonutrients that signal the body to make more glutathione. Now, glutathione peroxidase, that pathway, or glutathione, is a molecule that's, as an antioxidant, hundreds or even thousands of times more powerful than a vitamin C molecule. So understanding how this cell signaling works, it takes years to unravel all this with the research. And we've got human clinical trials going on with this at the moment. The technology, this is astonishing, may be exerting its effects by renewing your biological clock. In other words, by slowing down aging. And actually, we've just been granted what's been called a landmark patent around this technology. And this says its methods and compositions for supporting endogenous systems like glutathione related to lifespan. It's basically saying, if you read between the lines, that you will live longer, and your health, not just your lifespan, but your health span will be increased if you take the products that USANA are producing, the cell signaling products. So we're working on four main areas at the moment. One, cell signaling, another is the microbiome, and we're aiming to be the leading researcher on microbiome research. That's exploding, as you undoubtedly know. Traditional Chinese medicine, which is an area that's really been a bit closed to the West and a bit unknown, but we're teaming up with Chinese universities to put this ancient wisdom, of which there's tons, and validating it with Western protocols. It's a groundbreaking approach to unifying sort of Western and Eastern thinking. And the last area of research is cognitive function and sort of mental performance. So, really interesting areas of research. We've actually got something like 94 projects on the go at the moment, which will eventually result in improved formulas or new formulas. So one of the ways that this intelligence works is by triggering this thing called mitophagy. Now, we've got lots of mitochondria in the body. The mitochondria are basically, well, they're the powerhouses of the cells. They're where we convert in this ATP system, or the Krebs cycle, where we convert food into energy. And that is an incredible system. I would just sort of give you an example. So if we scale up this electrical cascade, this electron cascade that's going on in the Krebs cycle, and you scale it up to be the size of a table, it would be the equivalent of that table being hit by a bolt of lightning every second. But our mitochondria are so well insulated, this electron transport chain is so well insulated that we just don't explode. In fact, I've got a theory that if spontaneous human combustion is an actual thing, it may happen that somehow there's a leakage that happens. But anyway, that's just my wacky theory around it. But we need these mitochondria to function efficiently, and they should, for instance, in the liver, be replaced every 3 to 5 days. If we eat a high calorie, high carb diet, lots of processed foods, we don't trigger these mitochondria to renew themselves, and they don't work very well. So they produce less energy, and also the insulation around them stops being so efficient. And what we need to do is actually have a diet that triggers this mitophagy to happen with greater regularity. And we can do that. It's not just diet. We can do it through exercise, the kind of exercise I was talking about. We can do it through fasting. We can do it through sitting in a sauna. We can do it by rolling in the snow. We can do it by taking cold showers. But we can also do it a bit less painfully by putting in the correct phytonutrients that are part of this intelligence formula. And that triggers the same things. It's like mimicking the effect of fasting without having to fast. So that's what I was saying about, vitamin C will neutralize a free radical, glutathione will neutralize 100. So much more efficient system. And that has, part of that is what's resulted in this Platinum Plus award in this comparative guide. Microbiome, just mentioned it briefly before, but regulate immune. I won't go into all of this thing, but you will understand hopefully the importance of the microbiome. These are all the bacteria, viruses, fungal cells, archaea, protists, all the things that live in our gut, and not just in our gut, but in our mouths and on our skin and in our hair and on the soles of our feet and between our toes. And we have different colonies of microbiota all over the body, and we need to help the health of those colonies. So one thing that we're doing is this: we've got a whole area of research around the microbiome. One thing we're doing is starting to produce targeted probiotics. So not fairly recently, we introduced, for instance, a toothpaste which has ADP1 in, which is a postbiotic. It's a postbiotic toothpaste, and then there's a little lozenge that you put in your mouth at night. And that lozenge has the same bacteria as you'd find in the mouth of a baby. So if you've ever smelt the breath of a baby, it's lovely, isn't it? It's all pure and fresh. And that's what we're doing, is we're mimicking that. And the ADP1 clumps together the things that cause bacterial decay and bad breath. So strep mutans is the main bacteria there, and it clumps these things together and allows them to be flushed out the body when you spit out your toothpaste and stuff. So it's very, very clever stuff. I'll just mention, we also have this hospital called Sanoviv, which is a model for 21st century medicine. I won't go into it, but I'd say go and have a look at sanoviv.com. It's absolutely fascinating. It's probably the most advanced medical institute in the world. And it just has an amazing approach to medicine and functional medicine, which is kind of the evolving at the forefront of how medicine should be practiced, which is basically being a detective, being a Sherlock Holmes around someone's medical condition. And Sanoviv, uniquely, I believe, has been fully accredited by the Institute of Functional Medicine in Washington. And that's a truly great accolade, in my opinion. So also, I talked about community at the beginning. We have a wider vision, and this wider vision is to to help the health of the planet, through things like the Children's Hunger Fund, where we donate and pack up meals that go out to the third world to starving children. And also there's a disaster relief fund. So when you get, a typhoon or something, we've got a relief fund in place immediately. We don't have to go and raise those funds. It's in place. So often we're first on the scene of a disaster with aid because we've already thought ahead. So all the admin for that is picked up, by the way, by USANA. So it's not one of these things where you've got a CEO raking in tons of money and a bit of that money gets through to where you want it to. It's not that at all. So I'm not sure if I'll play this guy. Well, I might as well give my voice a rest for a second, but I won't be too much longer, by the way. Nearly done.
At Western, we have this preseason competition amongst the squad. Just for fun, I thought I'd get into the sprint race. And I ended up making it to the final heat. And one of the sprint coaches used to do bobsleigh, and he said, you'd be a freak athlete for that. So through the exchange program, I was in Germany trying to study physics during the week and training hard. Slept in a bunk in a barrack, no Wi-Fi, ate in the mess hall week after week. So that was my goal, to turn me from a regular athlete into Olympic champion. My first Olympics was Pyeongchang. The moment was such a surreal situation. You have cameras everywhere, you have people in the crowd, you have your parents somewhere nearby, someone screaming your name, and somehow you have to let it all phase out and just focus on you and the track. So to come through that finish line and see on the clock a number one, we knew we had won a gold medal. And it wasn't until the following night that it sinks in and you hear that anthem play and you realize you are now part of history. I was able to have the best results through my recovery, through my training, and absolutely through the nutrition. Nutrition is not a thing you can compromise on.
Oh, need to try and move on a slide. Oh. Oh, that was it. Okay, that was it. I didn't realize that was the last one. So what I was going to say is that, that guy is concerned. I really like him. I saw him speak at the last convention, but his goal is to win gold medals, isn't it? And he'll do that by keeping himself healthy, basically, so he can train harder. For us, I don't want to win a gold medal. I'm too old anyway, unless there's a gold medal for knitting or something. I'm not sure about. But what we're trying to do is stay healthy and stave off, as I said, I've said all the way through, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, etc., 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 have all a massive nutritional component and a massive lifestyle component. Do as many of those things as you can on the original pyramid that I put up. Do that, turn them into habits gradually, and it's difficult to change 10 habits, but change one habit. And then once you've got that habit in place, change another habit. Now, in my opinion, supplements, I've seen miracles, absolute miracles, just by giving someone good quality supplementation. When you add in diet, exercise, sleep, hydration, community, positive relationships, meditation, etc., you've got a recipe for superb good health. But I would say, don't underestimate the power of filling in nutritional gaps and optimizing your health through brilliant supplementation, because I've just seen such amazing results for doing that. So I would say thank you very much for tuning in. I hope that didn't take too much of you. Actually, it's quite a long talk, sorry about that, but I hope you found it interesting, and have a great rest of your Wednesday evening. I'm going to just check if there's any sort of questions in here or anything.
No questions, David. It's just all about how amazing you are. So, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So
Thank you very much. But Oh, Alex thinks I'm short-sighted. No, I know he's not saying that. I'm sure the medical approach is short-sighted, but I am slightly short-sighted. So good observation, Alex. Okay, so thanks again. And yeah, look forward to catching you on another talk very soon.
Thank you, David. It was brilliant.
Thank you. Great talk, David. Thank you.
Great. Pleasure.
Have a good night, all of you.
Yes, indeed. Okay. Over and out. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.